This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Welcome to this episode of Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur. Thanks for listening. With an Encore Career, the rewards are better than a cold beer on a hot day. And you can be creating value in the world beyond just winning the next pickleball game. You can work when you want, where you want, and you can do the work you love. You can live the dream. So if you're ready to get started, contact me at lynn@lynnfreest.com, and we'll start helping you begin your Encore Career. This is episode 169, and it's titled Finding Your Purpose with the Modern Elder Academy. So we'll go through a series of questions, and actually I'll be reflecting on what some people said in this class I'm in. So it's, what is the purpose course? Who's offering it, and why am I taking it? Then the people that I'll be reflecting on the comments they made in this course were Chip Conley, a section by Kari, Cardinale, and Jeff Hamaoui, another section by Richard Leider and Rich Feller, then some comments by Seth Godin and Dan Pink. So again, this has been a very rich experience, and I just wanted to share briefly some of the things that they shared with us. So what is the Purpose Course? Well, it's put on by the Modern Elder Academy, and the link to their website's in the show notes. And it's, as they say, it's to build a community of inspired and empowered midlifers. Our 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond are rich with potential. We've grown enough wisdom to know what's important and begun to get comfy in our own skin, just as it starts to sag. The Purpose Course is just what it says, is helping people to go back and rethink from a variety of perspectives, what is their purpose in life, especially if they're considering midlife and stretching out ahead of you. It's an 8-week online course, and it has a mix of online content and live sessions. It's highly interactive, has 30 different expert faculty contributing to it, and there were several hundred people that are registered for the course. And yet, it seems like an intimate setting sometimes because they break you into small groups to discuss material in the course. So, one, I highly recommend it. I'll have you look into it. I think this is the last course for this year, but I know they'll be offering the course again next year. So let's get into what I learned. The first person that shared with us is Chip Conley, one of the co-founders of the Modern Elder Academy. And he made several observations. First, 70% of us find our purpose in our work. And then we get to this point in midlife, maybe we're stepping away from full-time work or thinking about a change. What are we going to do if everything we had was wrapped up in the work? And he suggests you can consider it an evolution or a revolution. You could consider it an evolution. He says you're going to repot yourself in different soil in the organization. Maybe there's a different arena in the organization you'd prefer to be in than one you're now. Or maybe it's a revolution. Maybe you want to work independently or find a new source of inspiration or work that you want to do. And then he brings up concept that I've heard about in other places also. What's the difference between a job, a career, and a calling? And while he didn't use this example, that's one I've often heard, is they asked 3 people who are working in a building. One person said, "This is a job. I just lay bricks here." The second person said, "I'm a mason. I construct the brick and the masonry for all this wonderful building." And the third person said, "Well, this is my calling because I'm here building a cathedral." So you can just use those ideas, and none of them are wrong. I remember once when I was working, one of the people in the factory, his work at the factory was his job because his calling was to be a church organist. So he worked diligently at his job, was good at it, but his calling was being a church organist. So any of these things are not wrong or good or bad. They're just different. Then Chip has this concept from Japan called Ikigai. And it's a Venn diagram with 4 circles on it. And they combine the arenas of what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. And I think I've mentioned this in some earlier podcasts. It's an interesting way and a framework for looking at how do you find a calling, how do you find things. So one of the other comments, just briefly, he said about the Ikigai was, a big question there is, what am I willing to give up if I want to move more into my calling? Do I have to adjust my financial things so that I can live more cheaply? Do I have to give up a fear of failure because I'll be doing things that maybe I'm not real practiced at? And then do I have to give up an imposter syndrome, recognizing that I may not be the be-all, end-all of knowledge on this subject, but I'm going to be helping and contributing in that. So again, it's just some interesting insights, one take on how you explore the idea of your purpose. The next session was with Kari Cardinale and Jeff Hamaoui, and they talked about a purpose map, and they used the idea of 4 quadrants. And there was the quadrant of personal, professional, relationships, and community. And what they did there is they said, in that 4 quadrants, just list some of the things that first come to mind around what is your purpose around some personal issues? What is your professional purposes, relationships? So they ask you just to list those in the quadrants. But then they had us do something pretty interesting. They said, kind of rank order them within the quadrants so that you get a feel of what do you feel is the most important of those things that you have purpose around. And then they said, beyond that, take them out and rank order them overall. So do you feel that your purpose around relationships is the highest ranking, or your personal purpose, whatever it may be? But this whole idea of putting things on paper, going back and rank ordering them really provided some interesting ideas for us. And then the idea is, as you looked at these things, you had them in front of you, is there alignment or tension between any of them? So you may have purposes around professional and purposes around a community. Do they align with each other? Do you sense some tension there? Again, there are no right or wrong answers, but it's interesting questions to explore as you think about this idea of what's my purpose. And then finally, they just said, depending on what you put down there, do you consider yourself to be over or under-purposed? And quite frankly, a lot of people, myself included, it's possible I'm over-purposed. There's so many things that I'm interested in that I think would be useful. I may not really be able to get to them all, or certainly not give them all the attention that they deserve. So it's just an interesting idea there. The next session is with Richard Leider and Rich Feller, and each of them work in this area of purpose, especially purpose in midlife. And one of them made the quote, he says, "Purpose is what puts a whistle in my work." Just that little mental image there. And then they said, do I give and grow every day in what I do? Is it a purpose? Do I give and grow every day? And whatever I do every day, does it feed my soul? Again, not everything we do every day feeds our soul, but is there something out there? Can you go back and think about, oh, man, when I do that, it really energizes me. And then they talked about some of the things in people, as they've interviewed people in midlife and beyond. What are the worries people have? The top 3 were being irrelevant, just no longer able to contribute, at least in their eyes. Being isolated. Again, some of us, when we leave the community of, quote, work, that's all we had. And so now all of a sudden we begin to feel isolated. Invisible. Again, that kind of goes back to being irrelevant, but invisible is nobody even knows who I am or what I do or why they should even care about me. So those were the top 3 things they said were of concerns to people: being irrelevant, isolated, and invisible. Then they talked about what are some of the hope. One of the hopes was being understood. Whatever I have to say, are people understanding me and what I have to say? And the second one was being able to anticipate something better. Is there something I've got to look forward to? And I think a while back I did a book where they said having a positive perspective on aging can add 7.5 years to your life. So this whole idea of, am I anticipating something better, is probably a pretty key question. Then Richard and Rich kind of talked about some other offers, and they said one of them, I think it was Viktor Frankl, had 2 basic questions. Who are you and what do you want? Again, questions you can use some time. You can be quick to answer, but if you sit with those questions for a while, it may take some time and you really have to think about them. And then finally, they gave a napkin formula for purpose, as they called it. They said, you add up the gifts you have, the passions you have, and the values you have, and that will help lead you to what is your purpose or your calling. Again, that's a shorthand thing, something you could really spend a lot of time exploring. But what are your gifts, your passions, and your values? And finally, they made the distinction between what they called the big purpose, my big purpose in life, and the fact that we can always contribute small purposes. They said there's 1,440 small purpose moments in a day. So some of that is, hey, you can always do something for a purpose. That you're not always building a cathedral. Maybe you're truly just getting the next row of bricks done. So always, while we hold the big P of purpose, understand that we can make small contributions to our purpose every day. Then we had a discussion by Seth Godin, and he has some interesting observations from his very storied career in marketing and understanding those things. And he said, boomers are contagious. And he said, it's whatever the boomers have done in life, other people tend to follow along, or at least they're aware of it, just because the group is so big. But he says a couple of things come to mind when he talked about purpose in the second part of life. One, it's hard to make a living as a freelancer, especially as you compare it to having, quote, a job or a work in corporate life or nonprofit. When you have a job, things are very structured. You get a paycheck, hopefully, those kinds of things. But living as a freelancer is actually pretty challenging. And then he says you have to be able to find something that you can make a difference where people will pay you for it. So obviously some things, and I've heard other people say, you may have a passion or a calling, but if no one will pay for it, you have a hobby, or you have some other kind of nonprofit or service type thing. But that's a key thing out there is you can either, people will pay you for it or not pay you for it, but it's something to be considered. And then finally, Seth said, we can go all fancy on purpose and what it means and all those kinds of things. But he says, maybe it's just also a process. So he said, what are the series of tasks, efforts, skills, or development that you could commit to that would light you up in the end? What is it would really get you energized? If you did these tasks, you made these efforts, you had these skills, or you did this development. So that's just another way to explore what might you be thinking of as purpose. And the very last thing he said was, hey, can you go out and make the world better for just 5 people? Because that would be a start and really a tremendous contribution if you could make the world better for 5 people. So the final contributor was Dan Pink, and he's written many books, but this book that they talked about was Regrets. So he discussed what are the 4 main regrets that he found in people. And again, some of this is not people were thinking that means you're just dwelling in the past. And that's not his intent. His intent is that we will recognize that what we have regrets over, but how can it inform us moving forward? So one, he said, foundational regrets are, if only I'd done the work, those kinds of things. Sometimes things we did or didn't do early in life, those we have what are called foundational regrets on. And then the second one was boldness. Did I take enough risks? Did I take big enough steps? And often Dan said, this is something that comes up when you're later in life. People on their deathbed say, I should have taken more risk because nothing that bad was ever going to happen if it didn't work. The third group of regrets is moral. And some of this is not just doing really bad stuff, but it may be you just took the low road or maybe even just the easy road and didn't stand up for the values that you had. So you let something go and didn't call it out. Again, you often just took the easy road. But these are the things that kind of tug at you and hold you back. And finally, the other regret was connection. And this kind of boiled down to neglecting the people that matter to you. So where are the people in life, as you look back, you neglected or you are neglecting that means something to you. So it's those four: foundational, if only I'd done the work; boldness, it means more later in life. Did I take enough chances? Moral, did I take the low or easy road? And then connection. Have I neglected the people that mattered? Then he proposes a little thought experiment there. Think about what we missed 10 years ago that we have these regrets around. Is there anything we can change in our trajectory so that 10 years from now, we don't have those same regrets? So it's not just what I do today, tomorrow. What's that picture 10 years out? What do I want to be? What do I want to have done over a 10-year period of time? And then finally, again, he says, regrets aren't bad or something you should just wallow in or dwell on, but they are an indication of what you value. Obviously, if you didn't care about something, you really wouldn't have any regrets about it. Now, you might have to go back and in this idea of looking for purpose and stuff, say, was I caring about something I really didn't value, or have my values changed if I was all wrapped up in corporate life and I was neglecting my family? Those are the kinds of things where maybe it's time to shift, recognize that I have a regret over what I did, and then what can I do different going forward? So just a quick recap then. It was, like I said, it was just literally one section of the course. So I highly recommend the course to anybody, especially if you're in midlife or, as my audience is, beginning an Encore career. So we talked about these different really talented people that shared information: Chip Conley, Kari, Cardinale, and Jeff Hamaoui, Richard Leider, Rich Feller, Seth Godin, Dan Peak. As I said, marvelous wealth of information, and I've shared just a few moments of the wisdom that they shared with us. So again, I hope this helps, or at least gives you some things to think about, and maybe it sparks you to take the course for yourself. Well, with an Encore career, the rewards are great, and you can be creating value in the world beyond just winning the next pickleball game. You can work when you want, where you want, and do the work you love. If you're ready to get started today, please contact me at lynn@lynnfrias.com or head over to the website at lynnfrias.com, listen to a few podcasts, get on the email list. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.